So here I'm going to go to the black screen. And now I'm going to turn off the view of the video panel, and that blocks things on the right. And then I'm going to turn off the thing at the top, which blocks things at the top, and that's the floating meeting controls. There's a thing right now in the middle that blocks things. It'll only last for a few seconds. Okay, now, although this is not a big deal in this presentation of part one, in part two, it's going to be a much bigger deal. Presentation does include QR codes, but in this case, there's only, I believe, only one at the end. If you're not familiar with QR codes, let me make a suggestion. Each QR code provides a quick way to access a web page or a PDF document or a phone or tablet app that you can install, or even an email that you can send. And that's what you're going to see today. There's one at the end with an email QR code. Now, why are QR codes valuable to you? Well, for one thing, you all know some web pages have very long web page addresses, otherwise known as URLs. And typing them can be a painful experience because when you make a typo, it's sometimes hard to figure out which character or characters you have to change. The advantage of QR codes is when you scan the QR code, it can get you to that web page immediately without typos. And the longer the URL, the greater the advantage of that over typing. It saves you time and it saves you the frustration of typos. Now, if you are running any Android, if you have any Android phone with Android 10 or later, or any Apple iPhone with iOS 11 or later, those things are already capable of scanning QR codes. And the camera app, although you may have to turn on a switch to make it work, the camera app will scan the QR codes when it sees a QR code, and there's absolutely no need to tap the shutter button. So it's really convenient. Now, I'm going to assume that you don't know how to do that. I did a presentation for APCUG, and it's now on YouTube, that explains how to do that. And here's the URL. It's not very long. And I'm going to even show you how to save this on your computer without having to write a note. The training in that YouTube video starts at time point 20 minutes and ends at time point 32 minutes and 28 seconds. So it's only 12.5 minutes long. It's a modest investment of your time, and it can give you a very useful skill. In presentations, though, you may not know, there is a way to save information like this immediately on your computer. It will take you less than a second if you're using a Mac or a Windows PC. And here's how to do it. I call it Save Now, Scan Later. And the idea is that there's a keystroke you can use to save the current screen image. And then you, if that image has a URL in it, you can type it later. If that image has a QR code in it, you can scan it later. And every time I show you such a slide, you're going to see information at the bottom of the screen, like I'm showing you now. It tells you what to do in Windows. You hold down the Windows key and tap print screen. And that saves to a subfolder under your pictures folder called screenshots. In Macintosh, slightly more complex, hold down the Command key and the Shift key. And while you're doing that, tap the number 5. And that will save the current screen image to your desktop. Now, this is a great way in general to take notes during a presentation like this. But it's even more important if you want to actually use the QR code later. And in this case, you can save any screen image, but in particular, I encourage it for a screen image of a QR code or a URL. And once you've saved it, which takes only about a second, then later at your convenience, you can do whatever you need to do with it. You can open and display the screen image file. And if it contains a QR code, you can scan it at that point at your convenience after the presentation is over. So I'm going to show that last slide again, the one with the URL, and this time with the reminder in it. At the bottom, how to save now and scan later. So if you want to watch that YouTube video, you now have a convenient way to make that note at home on your computer without having to write anything. You just use save now, scan later. And while you do that, I'm going to take a sip of my tea.
I hate to ask this, stupefy here for a second, but the print screen, where is that located? Because I'm trying to find it on mine and I'm not seeing it.
Okay, on my computer, it is to the right of, on my computer keyboard, it is to the right of the main typing area. And there's a block of 6 keys: insert, home, page up, delete, and page down. And above insert, there is the print screen key. It is sometimes labeled PRTSCR and sometimes labeled with the 2 words print screen.
I am not seeing that at all.
Are you on a Windows machine or a Mac?
I'm on a Windows, but it's an older Windows.
Okay. It's almost inevitably along the top row of keys, to the right of the keys that are labeled
Okay,
F1 through
I found
F10.
it.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it.
Let me check it out real quick.
Yeah, give it a test.
Well, I didn't notice any difference when I pressed down on both of them. You do it at the same time, don't you?
I start with the Windows key, and while it's held down, I tap print screen just to make sure that they're both down at the same time.
Okay, I did that, but I didn't see anything pop up or anything.
Okay, you didn't see the screen blink?
Yes, that I saw.
Okay, that means it stored the image in the place that I described.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I missed that. What was the place you said?
Okay, it's a subfolder of the pictures directory for your account, and that subfolder is named screenshots.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, glad to know that you all want to try this out. This is a useful technique.
I have a question.
Fire away.
Yes. I followed up to, now you're at where we can actually put this on our computer. So now what are we doing? Hitting at the bottom. I'm with Windows.
Hold down the Windows key. While that's held.
Oh yeah, Windows key. Okay.
Yeah, and while that's held down, you tap print screen.
And that's at the top there where you were telling.
Somewhere across the top, almost inevitably, you'll find something labeled either PRTSCR or the words print screen.
I see PRTSC.
That's good
then
enough.
Below it SYSR. Good enough. Punch them together, right?
Hold down the Windows key, and while you're holding that down, tap the PRTSC.
Got it.
Key.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, let me emphasize, this is a very useful note-taking technique while you're watching a presentation like this. You don't have to limit yourself to the point where there is a URL or a QR code on the screen. You can use it at any time. I put the reminders in when I think it's useful for you, especially to do something like watch this YouTube video. But you can use it at any time. And one of the folks in my club here in Northern Virginia literally does that for every presentation he watches. He captures every slide of every presentation he watches so that he can review it on his own before the video even becomes available. And just by the way, once we're finished here, I am within a day or so, I am going to send a PDF copy of this slide deck to your club so you can share that as well. Because I know some people prefer to watch a video and some people prefer to see the slides. So you're going to have both opportunities. Another black screen, my goodness. That must mean, yep, it's time to show you the title slide. Complete Robocall Defense Part 1. and today's date and the name of your club. Just by the way, I visited the Louisiana area a few times. Back in the early 80s, I was down there a couple of times to visit a friend who lived in New Orleans. And more recently, I was driving my daughter's car from her husband's old post in El Paso to their new post in Columbus, Georgia. And I made a point of spending a couple of days in Houma, which is just west of New Orleans. I had a great time. It's the first time I actually got out to see what a bayou is. It was a lot of fun. Now, I have updated this presentation within the last month for iOS 16 and Android 13. If you have older versions of the operating system on your phones, you'll still be able to do things. Here's my agenda. Tonight, we're going to talk about the scale of the robocall problem. The data is a little bit old because the FBI no longer reports it broken out by cell phones and email scams. They just provide an overall picture now. We'll talk about how robocalls impact you. Some of you may have already lost some money due to robocalls. Goals of robocall defense, we'll talk about that because robocalls have a lot of different impacts. Past methods, one of which you can still use on your landline if you have one. Why some of those past methods, including a government website called donotcall.gov and blacklists, which are enforced by various services for your phone, do not work anymore. And I'm going to show you how to use your contacts in a different way called a whitelist. As you might guess, blacklist is a list of known robocall numbers, and a whitelist is a list of numbers you want to reach you. And inevitably, your contacts list is a list of people you do want to hear from. And we'll use a technique on your phone called Do Not Disturb, so that your phone itself will enforce the whitelist without the any cooperation by any other service or any other app. And you'll learn a lot of jargon along the way, so you can impress your friends. Now let's talk first about the scale of the robocall problem. Even considering that this information was collected in 2018 and reported in 2019, I think you'll be a little surprised. This number was published in the Washington Post in 2019. The estimated robocall volume as of March of 2019 was 5.2 billion, billion with a B. And for those of you who are engineers, you may appreciate some of the other forms of that number that I showed here. Now, if you just figure out the number of seconds in the month of March, which I did, that means the rate per second, and this is kind of astounding, the rate of robocalls per second in that month was about 2,000. And you may remember this phrase from a man named P.T. Barnum, a sucker is born every minute. Well, evidently the robocalls think there's a lot more than that now. Okay, now the FBI produces an annual internet crime complaint report, and they did an analysis of robocalls in 2018 and published it in late 2019 in their report. And it looked like this. They had records of 26,379 United States residents reporting falling for phishing, not just receiving a call, but actually following up on it. And that phishing is an attempt to convince you falsely that the caller has a legitimate need for your social security number, your date of birth, your account ID, and password, and other things that are personal to you. Now, as a result of that falling for phishing, those people lost nearly $50 million. And that was an average of $1,900 per person. That's a lot of money. And when you're retired, it's especially painful. Now, the FBI published another report in 2020 covering the year 2019, and you can download it if you wish. Oh, there is a QR code in here. Look at that. So here's the URL that allows you to download that annual report. And if you have the capability or you learn the capability, you scan QR codes, you can use the QR code to get to it instead of having to retype that URL. So you can save this now and scan later. I put the reminders on the bottom of the screen just in case you want to see the report. I did read some of the later reports. Like I said, they weren't very good at breaking out robocalls versus email phishing, or these days, for that matter, text message phishing. I get a lot of those now. In 2020, the incident count was actually up by a factor of almost 10, 241,342. And it means more people reported, but the amount lost wasn't much greater. And that means the average wasn't as much. And what I think it was going on between those 2 years is more people found out how to report to the FBI that they had lost money. And so more people reported. Sometimes they reported to their local police or to the state police, but that all gets aggravated into the FBI report. So if you want to see an example of that kind of report, you can save this slide now so you can scan later. And by the way, if you absolutely don't want to have anything to do with QR codes, the URLs will be live in the PDF. So you can click on them to get to, I'm in the PDF of my slide deck. So you can click on them to get to websites like this. Now, just in case you bought your very first cell phone last week, let's talk about what the impacts of robocalls can be on you personally. And it's not just losing money. It turns out robocalls, when ringing your phone, present a caller ID that is usually listed as unknown or may be unfamiliar to you. And that might even be in your own area code. For those of you who don't know, the next 3 digits after the area code in a phone number are called an exchange. And I have found that many of the robocalls I receive are in my own area code and my own exchange. That is meant to suggest falsely, by the way, that a neighbor is calling. And that's almost inevitably not the case. The extreme case is when the displayed number for the caller ID is your own phone number. And that does happen. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I know other people, including one of my kids, who has experienced that. But here's the thing that really bothered me when I started working on how to resolve this. Robocall voicemails come in, even if I don't answer, and clog my voicemail inbox to its limit so that later callers can't even leave a message. And I don't want my friends to run into that. So I found because of the limit on the size of my voicemail inbox, back in 2017, 2018, I was having to clean it out twice a week. That's how much robocall voicemails filled up my inbox. Now, how do they take your money if you do answer the call? Robocalls often demand an urgent reply. They are suggesting that you have to act immediately, and they falsely suggest that they are from the government or your bank. And I might add that they may suggest that they are from the Social Security Administration. Their Social Security Administration never, ever contacts you by phone unless you call them first. So if you think it's a call from the Social Security Administration, think again. And in particular, if they refer to your social security number as your social, which is what robocallers do constantly, and the Social Security Administration does not, don't give out the information. Now, if you do give out the information, what do? They use that to get on the website for your bank or the IRS and falsely suggest that they are you. And what that does is allow them to take money from your bank account or take your IRS refund. There's a lot of different things they can accomplish if they have that information. So don't give it out.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, go ahead.
How can you check and see if it's on the dark web, any of your information?
There are companies, including some credit cards, that will do that check for you. Let me make a suggestion, okay? It can be useful to find that, and there are services that will, for a fee, maybe the right way to phrase it is this: do the best they can to remove it from those websites. It's never perfect, unfortunately. And this is because you move it from one website, the same person who posted it in one place may pop up and post it somewhere else. So it's one of those ongoing games. I have an app on my phone that is a database of all of my accounts. I have over 130 combinations of passwords and IDs for various services, and I keep that in a central database. Well, that central database company that provides the app also provides an automated backup on their server farm, a way of saying the cloud. And then they check to see if that information is on the dark web, and they actually notify me of it. They also notify me of any duplicates of passwords that are in the database, and I can go and change those all to be unique. It's a very convenient service there. But you should talk to your credit card company and see if they will do the search for you, and see if they will also act to get it cleaned up on the dark web. I'm not saying it's perfect. The best thing that most such companies can do, rather, is to tell you what it is on the dark web, and you can change the passwords so that they are not on the dark web.
What if your social security number gets on the dark web? What then?
I think that's rather rare. It does occasionally happen when you see that a large organization has been broken into. One example that happened to affected me was Target. They lost 140 million records. Now let me explain what a proper company does to protect your information. They don't store your credit card number in a clear, readable form. They store it encrypted. And what happens when you provide a credit card number to them, they match it, they encrypt what you have just provided and compare it against the encrypted version in their database. If they're doing things right, they'll do that for every piece of sensitive information about you, such as your date of birth, such as your driver's license number, such as your social security number, if they are doing it right. And that if varies from one company to another. The companies that get broken into, they encrypt everything. They've learned their lesson the hard way. The companies that haven't been broken into, or at least haven't publicly announced they've been broken into, they may not be so secure. But certainly finding your SSN in clear form on the web is a very, very nasty situation. And I can't give you any real, that's obviously something that for most people for their entire lives doesn't change. Oddly enough, I know of situations where people have applied to get a new social security number and it has been issued to them. And that's something you might want to consider if your social security number shows up on the dark web. I don't know if they'll change it just on the basis of proof that it's on the dark web. And I don't know what kind of proof the Social Security Administration would request from you. But that's something that you may consider if you have proof positive that your social security number is on the dark web. I've never run into that myself. But I know from my viewpoint, personally, I'd be hustling to my local social security office to ask them what they can do for me if I found proof positive that my social security number was on the dark web.
That makes total sense to me.
Most people find that they lose a social security number if it was printed clearly on their driver's license and they lost their driver's license. I've lost mine once. I left it in a hotel, and fortunately I had a duplicate, so I could continue driving. But that particular driver's license didn't have my social security number on it. So I got lucky. The last time Virginia used social security numbers on driver's licenses was more than 25 years ago, I believe. I can't swear that that's true in every state in the United States, though. Now, just in case losing money from your bank account isn't enough to motivate you, this literally happened to me. A person who stole my briefcase from a place where I had given a presentation in person, obtained my passport. Now, it was already expired, but they altered that passport and put their picture in it and used it to get a US, actually a Virginia driver's license. And they opened store credit accounts to buy expensive goods in the area where I live. And that's how I found out about it, because one of the places where they applied called my house and talked to my wife and found out I was at work that day. I wasn't in their store applying for credit. So they denied the credit. And that's how I found out that this happened. It actually happened at over a dozen retailers here in Northern Virginia. And it took me 7 years to get that stuff cleared up off of my credit report. So that was back in the 90s. And I have been a lot more careful since then. And Zoom has made it possible to provide presentations without appearing in person. So I'm not hauling all my goodies around with me. All right, let's go on. So the first thing we're going to teach you, and this is the subject of tonight's presentation, is how to prevent robocalls from ringing your phone so you won't be tempted to answer. This is covered tonight. I'm going to show you step by step and click by click how to accomplish that on your Android phone or your iPhone. In part 2, a month from now, we're going to learn how to prevent robocalls from leaving voicemail for you so you won't be having to clear out your voicemail inbox a couple of times a week like I was back in 2017, 2018. And convince robocall systems not to call your number again. And this works. In fact, it uses a very old technology that I will explain to you tonight, in part 2. And of course, you'll know the jargon. And so you can convince your family and friends that you are an expert, that you know what you're talking about. So let's look at those past methods to deter robocalls and find out the first one we're going to see still works. The others don't. And this is the first one. It's called Telezapper. This was actually marketed for landlines in the 1990s, and I bought one, and it worked. It does one thing. When the phone rings, it answers, and it plays 3 tones that are probably familiar to you because they were played whenever you dialed a wrong number, and they're called special information tones. And on when I make my next tap here to show you the next paragraph, you're going to hear them. Those are the special information tones. Now, Telezapper is still available. I think I bought it at Best Buy back in the 90s, but it's now on Amazon. It's some forms of it are much thinner than the one you see here, but you connect one end to the incoming phone line, or one socket. It has 2 sockets on the back, one socket on an incoming phone line, and the next socket goes to your landline phone, or if you have a landline answering machine, you can connect that to the other socket on the Telezapper.
I never heard the sound of the thing.
Did it come through the second time?
No.
No.
You know what? I know what I did wrong. So let me fix that for you. I'm going to have to exit the slide deck here for a moment. Stop the share. I'm going to restart it on that slide, but I forgot to click the button when I shared the presentation that allows me to share the sound that's built into the presentation. I forgot to do that. So now I've clicked it, and I'm going to go back to when I resume the presentation sharing, I'm going to go back to the slide that plays the sound so you can all hear it. First, I have to hide those things, particularly the floating meeting controls again. Yeah, let's see here. Hide the floating meeting controls, and that box will disappear in a couple of seconds. So then I can tap that button and go back. Did you hear it that time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So usually when you hear those tones on the phone, it's followed by an automated message that says, this number is not in service, or this number has been disconnected. Please check the number and dial again. And it's not my voice, it's some, voice from the phone company. Now, the next thing that came up, this was in, I think, the early 2000s, was a website created by the Federal Trade Commission, an agency of the US government, that allowed consumers to identify themselves and their phone numbers. And you might guess by the name of the website that the point was to notify the world that if you call these folks, you're violating a federal law. And indeed, anybody who called you after you were listed on donotcall.gov was subject to an $11,000 fine per call. And that applies only to businesses having no prior business relationship with you. And it worked for a few years. Many cold callers, as they say, got religion because they didn't want to pay that fine. But there was a critical element in the way it was enforced. The FTC relied on the call recipient to obtain the caller's caller ID. And possibly if they left a message for you, possibly they left a number to call them back. So you'd give that to the Federal Trade Commission. And as I said, it worked for a few years, but as usual in any competition between law enforcement and technologically oriented criminals, there were workarounds that were discovered. And we're going to talk about the biggest one here in just a moment. First, a blacklist. Now, there are many services that exist today that are based on the idea that a list of caller IDs used by any robocall system can be enforced through what's called a blacklist. In other words, if you know the caller ID, you can add it to a list of known caller IDs used by robocallers. The problem is there's a workaround for it. And eventually a lot of robocall systems learned the workaround. But there are services that still exist today that use a version of the blacklist. One of them is an app. Since I used Verizon Wireless, that app was included on my phone, called the Verizon Wireless Call Filter. And later on, you're going to read my experience with that app. Other systems, Umail, which is a freebie, and Nomo Robo, which costs $20 per year. They base their services on blacklists that their system manage and edit and update. RoboKiller is a bit different. We're going to talk about that. I shouldn't have included that in this paragraph. But robocall systems worked out a way to evade the blacklist based on technology that's built in by AT&T Long Lines, the switching system provider, all the way back in the early 1960s, almost precisely 60 years ago. And this is, I'm going to explain it to you. This is why robocall systems, including donotcall.gov, Nomo Robo, Umail, and Verizon Wireless Call Filter don't work anymore. They use 3 evasion methods. One of them is legal. They're working primarily from offshore locations outside of US legal jurisdiction. The second one is the biggie, and I'm going to explain it in detail, spoofing. And what that does is allow them to send a caller ID that is not theirs. Could look like it belongs to a neighbor, could look like it belongs to somebody else. And in fact, some of those incorrect caller IDs do belong to real people, but they're being used as a fake caller ID by robocallers from outside the US. And finally, it is now possible, and has been for years, to enter the phone network through what's called voice over IP, which means the internet. And when you enter through the internet, you don't originate a call from any real caller ID at all, just from an IP address. But as I said, we're going to focus on spoofing because this is the big one. Spoofing is a technique that robocall systems use to remain anonymous and untraceable. They provide a fake caller ID. And now, even if they place a number of calls, they provide a different one for each call. So the FTC cannot find them. And that means the phone number displayed by caller ID is not the number from which the robocall system calls. This capability was built into the telephone company's switching system servers, which are now used all over the world. It was built in the early 1960s and it had a very benign business purpose that made a lot of sense. But the phone company, AT&T, made a critical mistake. They put no security on it. And that means anybody who finds out how to use it can use it. And that includes you.
Does that mean even today?
Oh, yes. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the spoofed caller IDs are actual real phone numbers belonging to other people. You can even spoof your own number through websites like this one that I'm showing to you right now. Now I'm going to tell you this works, but in order to make it work, you have to give them your real phone number and the real phone number that you want to call. And there's a gotcha. When you do that, the spoofing website can sell both numbers to robocall systems because they know the numbers are live. So don't do it. My son did it once. He called me using that service. That's how I found out about it. It's not a good idea. Don't use it. Okay, now, robocall systems literally change their spoofed caller ID constantly, and that doesn't mean once a day. It means once per call. And if they place 1,000 calls, which is very typical for a given hour of the day, it's going to use 1,000 different caller IDs, none of which are real for them. And blacklists simply can't keep up. And if they did, they would be listing real numbers of innocent individuals in their blacklist, which means other people who tried to call them, it would be blocked, even their friends. So blacklists are just not useful anymore. And I've even talked to people who subscribe to systems like Nomo Robo, and they've told me that it's becoming less and less capable of blocking robocalls. Now, here's why we're going to configure your phone to prevent robocall systems from ringing your phone. It's, first of all, this is your first line of defense. Don't risk talking to a smooth salesman who can steal your money or your identity. More importantly, our generation, I'm 70 years old, just by the way, I know I don't look it, but I am. Our generation grew up in the landline era, and I remember the landline at my parents' home, and the importance of making sure the phone was answered was taught to us over and over. And in a way, it was fun, finding out who's calling. So we need to recognize that that training from that era is not exactly useful in the era of smartphones and robocalls. So we need to unlearn it. And the safest way is don't unlearn it, configure your phone so that it won't ring when a robocaller calls. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And what we're going to do is configure your phone to enforce a whitelist, meaning, as I said earlier, it will only ring when somebody in your contacts list is calling you. More generally, a whitelist is a list of callers who you want to talk to. You want them to ring your phone so you can answer. And you can think of the world of potential callers in three groups: whitelist, blacklist, and other. And your contact list is a perfect example of a whitelist. Your smartphone can be configured so that only a caller with a number in your contacts list on that phone will ring your phone. I'm going to show you how to do that tonight. And here's a summary of what we're going to do. Both Android phones and iPhones provide a capability called Do Not Disturb. And very important, your smartphone allows you to specify an exception when it's operating in Do Not Disturb mode. And that exception means certain people will be allowed, when they call, to ring your phone. And we're going to set this exception, contacts. And that means everyone in your contacts list on your smartphone will be allowed to ring your phone. And that eliminates the blacklist. Not that it can be well defined anymore, but it eliminates the blacklist. So your contacts act as your whitelist. All other calls do not ring your phone, but they will light up the phone screen and they will go to voicemail. And that means you can listen to and respond if the caller is a legitimate caller and leaves a legitimate voicemail. Now, in Android phones, your smartphone settings app has a Do Not Disturb on-off switch. So you can turn off Do Not Disturb easily when you do expect to receive a call from somebody in the category that I called other. And a typical reason to do so is when you expect a call from a business or an individual who's not in your contacts. Sometimes that happens with doctors because sometimes they call from a different number, not the number that you use to call them. If that's the case, then you need to put the number they use to call you in your contacts list, along with the number you use to call them. Now, your smartphone allows you to set a schedule for Do Not Disturb. And I set my schedule to start at 10 o'clock p.m. and end at the same time, which means a day later. And that gives me 24/7 Do Not Disturb behavior. The advantage of a schedule is this: if you do turn off Do Not Disturb manually using the switch, and just by the way, there's a form of the switch on iOS 16 Apple iPhones, but it is not as convenient as this switch used to be prior to iOS 16. If you forget to turn on Do Not Disturb later, then your daily schedule will turn it on for you, even if you forget. So that's a very valuable feature of the schedule behavior associated with Do Not Disturb. I mentioned this is a pure whitelist strategy. I mentioned why a pure blacklist strategy no longer works. It's simply because robocall systems spoof their caller ID. When I used the blacklist strategy via the Verizon Call Filter app, it blocked only about 50% of the robocalls. You're going to see actual statistics later on from my phone. There are limits to the whitelist approach. As I mentioned, there's a third group called others. And I've told you how, when you're expecting a call from someone who's not in your contacts list, you can turn off the Do Not Disturb behavior temporarily so you can receive that call.
Okay, will you be showing us where to find this on our phone in a minute?
Oh yes, I've got screen captures coming up that will show you every tap you need to do.
Excuse me 1 second. I have something called silence unknown callers on my cell phone. Would that work too?
What brand of cell phone and what?
I have an iPhone 13, and I've got something that says silence unknown callers. It's off right now.
Okay. I believe that does something very similar, but let me explain. I have an iPhone 10 that is retired. It is no longer connected to the cell phone network. So I'm going to show you how to configure that. It's running iOS 16. I have not found the feature that you just described. And I'm sorry, I can't comment on it because not only do I have no experience with it, even if I tried it, I wouldn't be able to tell how it differs or how similar it is to what I'm going to teach you.
Okay, can I just say one more thing though, for anybody who does have a 13 or beyond? It says calls from unknown numbers will be silenced, sent to voicemail, and displayed on the recents list. Incoming calls will continue to ring from people in your contacts, recently outgoing calls, and Siri suggestions.
Right.
Sounds pretty
I have
good.
it on mine as well.
Sounds pretty good, that.
That sounds very similar to what I'm going to show you. And frankly, given what you've told me, it sounds like it's easier to implement. But
Yeah.
for the rest of us, I'll show you the technique that I know.
The question before you get, would you talked about the whitelist, blacklist, and other? Would you also have numbers that call you, but they were not in your contact? And would this stop their calls?
Those calls will not ring your phone. And those calls will go to voicemail. If they want to leave a voicemail, they can. And you will see them listed in recent calls. And of course, if they leave a voicemail, they'll be listed in voicemail and you can listen to them.
Thank you. They'd have to be in your contact, yes.
Well, if to ring your phone, they have to be in your contact.
Right, have to be in the contact.
And a little later on, I'm going to give you a list of things I think people should consider adding to their contacts. Now, there's a limit to what the whitelist approach can achieve. And one of those is that almost all of us have our own phone number listed in contacts. And once in a while, robocall systems literally use that as the caller ID when they call your phone. Now, let me make a suggestion. When you see that, even though your phone rings, don't answer. It's obviously a robocall system because they're the only ones who can pull that off. It's very easily recognized. And of course, even in my case, since I have my own number in contacts, so I can easily provide it to other people as a text, such a spoof would ring my phone as well. Now, those of you who have iPhones, you can take a break. I'm going to show you the whitelist configuration for Android phones first. And then after that, we'll get to iPhones. Okay, so if you have an Android phone, you open the settings app and it'll look like this on your screen, at least for Android 13. And below here, as we go through various screens, I'm going to show you the click path, the tap path. So the first thing we're going to do is click on notifications. And I've circled it here on the screen so you can see it easily. And I've also noted it at the bottom. You click on that, another screen opens. And this is what it looks like. In that screen, you scroll down a bit because it won't be at the top and find Do Not Disturb, and you tap that. And that opens another screen. Here it is, the Do Not Disturb screen. This is where we're going to do most of what we have to do to enforce a 24/7 schedule for Do Not Disturb and to provide exceptions for the people in our contacts list. So we're going to, this is called the new schedule screen. We're going to tap add schedule, which I've circled for you. No, this is called the new schedule screen. Now, there's 3 things on this screen that you have to fill out or edit in order to make this work. From top to bottom, it's the name you assign to the schedule. And the reason they ask for a name is because it is possible to create multiple schedules. I am not going to cover why that might be useful, but that's why they require a name for the schedule. The second thing they require is to indicate which days of the week your schedule will apply to. And the default, as you can see here, every day of the week is circled. So you don't have to do anything with that. And then at the bottom, they show a default start time and end time for the schedule. We will have to change that. And by golly, there's an alarm going off on my phone. There we go. Got rid of that. So in the new schedule screen, you can type a schedule name and you can specify days of the week. As I said, it's already set to what we want to use, 7 days a week. And set the start time and end time for the schedule. So I'm going to show you first how to set the end time to be equal to the start time so that you've got a 24/7 schedule. And here I've blown up the time, the start time and the end time so you can see the default clearly. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we're going to set the end time to 10 p.m. And I'm going to show you how to do that. You click the default start and end times. I've circled it here for you. And you'll get an opportunity to change both. So set time pop-up appears at the bottom of the screen. And I've depicted that for you here. What you're going to do is click on end time because that's what we want to change. Here I circled end time for you. You tap that and it will allow you to separately adjust hours, minutes, and seconds. They're all vertical scrolling controls. So you scroll from 7 to 10 for the end time, and then you scroll from AM to PM, and finally, once you've made both of those adjustments for the end time, you click on the Done button in the lower right corner. Now, once you've done that, the pop-up disappears and you will see that as the adjusted time range on the screen. I circled that here for you so you can see it. And if you didn't do it correctly, you can do it again. Just tap the thing and repeat the process. Now, up at the top, as I mentioned earlier, the other thing you have to do is give a name to your schedule. And I suggest simply saying 24/7. It's nice and easy to type. And then once you've set the time correctly to be 24 hours a day, and you've given the schedule a name, you can tap the Save button in the lower right corner. It is not active until you've given the schedule a name. So you tap that, that screen closes. Now you're back on the main Do Not Disturb screen, and you'll see that it's been adjusted to show the name of the current screen, current schedule and its details, and then it will provide you the Add Schedule button again below it. Now, what we're going to do is set an exception to the Do Not Disturb behavior, and that exception is the whitelist that will be allowed to ring our phone. Other calls, meaning blacklist, and the third category, other, will not be allowed to ring our phone. They will be allowed to record voicemails. So you tap the calls, messages, and conversations heading, which I've circled here a little bit below Add Schedule. And then another screen appears, and it looks like this. Now, the main thing you have to adjust here is this thing I've circled called calls. And
Question, you
yes,
lost me on my, wait a minute, Do Not Disturb is scheduled to stay until 10 p.m. Do Not Disturb, it says sleeping. Sleeping.
you mean the title in black above the start and end times?
Okay, that screen that you have on now.
Yeah.
At the top, it has Do Not Disturb with the little arrow. Do Not Disturb. Do Not Disturb is scheduled to stay on until 10 p.m. That's afterward. That's what I have. Then I have the Do Not Disturb. Okay. Something.
You've got an iPhone.
Sleeping. Under Do Not Disturb.
Do you have an Android phone?
Yes, on the third line, under that Do Not Disturb schedule. Then the third one is sleeping. Sleeping.
Okay.
And then 24/7.
I think you took a wrong turn somewhere.
Yeah.
Let me make a suggestion that you wait until you have access to the slide deck PDF that I'm going to send, and and additionally wait until the video is available to you, and then you can work through it to see where you took the wrong turn and make the right turn instead.
Okay.
And that
All
way,
right.
the rest of us who are trying to keep
Okay.
up can keep
Okay.
up.
Okay.
I
Now,
think- excuse me, I think sleeping is just a predetermined thing because you can change, I tried to change it on mine and it opens it up to change 24/7 or whatever you want to call it.
oh, so you're suggesting that what she saw was the title that she
Yes.
can adjust to suit her needs.
If you tap that title, sleeping, you can call it whatever you want.
Does that word sleeping appear below the word schedule?
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does.
Yes.
Okay, you can tap that because that, based on what your colleague there suggested, that may be in fact the title, and you can change that title
Oh,
if you're in fact in the following the right path through the setting system.
okay. I tried, but I think I made a wrong turn, like you said, because
Okay,
it keeps telling me 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And
Well-
I changed it. Okay.
Okay.
give it a try again later on. I'm sorry. I can't correct you here because I'm actually not using my phone.
It's
I'm only
Okay.
using
I'll
screens that I
go back.
captured. for
I'll
my
go
phone.
back. It's okay. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Let's see here. Got to hide the floating meeting controls again. There we go. Okay, now under exceptions, when we tap calls, messages, and conversations, this allows us to define our whitelist as an exception to the do not disturb schedule. And here's what the screen looks like when you tap exceptions. We're going to change calls. The default for calls is all calls will get through during do not disturb. We don't want that to happen. So when we tap that, a pop-up appears. I'm going to show it to you. Here we are. And the pop-up gives you 4 choices, all, which is the default, and you can see a check mark by it, contacts only, favorite contacts only, and nobody. So we're going to tap the one I've circled, contacts only. When you do that, the pop-up disappears. And the new choice that you selected appears under the word calls. And this is the way we define our contacts as the whitelist that allows people to reach us while others will not ring the phone. And once you've done that, we're done setting up the whitelist, so we can tap the left arrow at the top of the screen, and that takes us back to do not disturb. There's 2 other things you have to do. The first one is to make sure that the do not disturb switch is turned on. I circled that at the top of the screen above the schedule. If it's not turned on, it'll be positioned to the left. All you have to do is tap it and it'll move to the right. The other thing we have to adjust is down at the bottom of the screen. It's called hide notifications. When you tap it, the hide notification screen appears. And here's what that looks like. Make sure every switch is turned off. I didn't know about this when I first set this up. I was at a grocery store, a big one called, what's it called? Wegmans. Those darn stores are 500 feet wide. And my son was shopping for his groceries in another part of the store. He tried to call me and I had set up everything except hide notifications. And what happened? My phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen stayed blank. I was not being notified on the screen that a call was coming in and I had no button to tap to answer the call.
Oh.
Well, that's when I went and investigated this screen. So I turned off every switch so that the notifications of an incoming call that was part of my whitelist would appear on the screen so I could answer the phone. Then I called my son. I asked him to call me again just to make sure that that worked. And it did. So that's why I know to tell you that you have to make sure every switch in this screen is turned off. And with that, you're done and you can close the settings app. How about that?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
On the previous screen, it said something about except for calls that repeatedly try to call you within 15 minutes.
Oh, very sharp eyes. Let me discuss that here. Let's see, where was that? Let's see here.
But they still have to be on the white list, right? Oh,
Repeat callers. There it is. There it is. You see that just below calls? It says repeat callers and the switch is turned off. You see that?
yeah.
Okay. This switch originally had a benign purpose. They would allow the second occurrence of a call that's not in your contacts to get through, to ring your phone. And some people who, for instance, a good example is a doctor's office. If they're calling from a number that's not in your contacts list, they might try again within 3 or 5 minutes. And if this switch is turned on, they will ring your phone. The problem is that robocallers know this, and they will try again within 15 minutes in some cases, not all cases. Some robocall systems try to take advantage of this. That's why I recommend that you leave the switch off. People who have a legitimate need to talk to you will leave a voicemail. Of course, robocallers will too. But I'm glad you caught that. It gave me an opportunity to explain it for you. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. We talked about hide notifications, and you can close the settings app. Now, let's suppose you know a call is coming in that's not in your contacts list, but somebody you want to talk to. You can turn off Do Not Disturb temporarily. Here's the switch. I pointed it out earlier as a switch that you normally have to have turned on. But if you need to disable Do Not Disturb temporarily, so somebody in the category of other can reach you, and you may be expecting a call from like the place that's repairing your car, for instance. You can turn off Do Not Disturb by just tapping the switch, and it moves to the left. So to get there in Android 13, it's settings, notifications, Do Not Disturb. And then the switch will be right at the top of the screen. So you can turn off that switch. And if you forget to turn it back on after the call comes in, then the schedule, and this is the main reason we set a schedule, by the way, the schedule will automatically resume Do Not Disturb in the on position every time when 10 p.m. rolls around again. It'll automatically turn it on. Now, if you're using an older Android, this same method that I've shown you will work in Android 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. But in Android 8, there was a different way to get to it, and they only allowed one schedule. They didn't permit naming the schedule because they only allowed you to create one. And that method is schedule, sound and vibration, Do Not Disturb. That works in Android 8. I don't know how farther back you can go and still use it, but it definitely works in Android 8. And no matter what version of Android that you are using, there is a search field at the top of the settings app. And you can type Do Not Disturb in that search field, and it will search for that capability in your Android phone, no matter what version of Android operating system that you use. Now, I admit, I don't know how far back that goes. I started using, when did I start using Android? 2014, I think. Okay, now for those of you who have iPhones, I'm going to show you the method I use. And it starts as it did in Android phones with the settings app. You open the settings app, and in iOS 16, it looks like this. And they grouped a number of related capabilities under a heading, which as of iOS 15 was called Focus. And there it is. I circled it. It usually has a moon icon associated with it. So you find that and you tap it. And that opens the focus screen. And at the very top of the focus screen, there is a Do Not Disturb choice. I circled that for you. Now, this will allow you to set your contacts as your whitelist, and it will also allow you to set a schedule for Do Not Disturb. As it happens in no, I'm not going to say that. So at the top of the do not disturb screen, there is a heading called allowed notifications. And right now we're going to click on people, because this allows us to say, we're going to allow people in our contacts to contact us via phone. So we tap people and the notification screen opens. I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. Here it is. So its default is to allow calls from everybody to reach you. You can see I circled that under the heading phone calls. It says allowed calls from. And we're going to change that to contacts. Here's how we do that. When you tap it, tap that word everybody, the default, it pops up a menu that includes everybody, allowed people only, favorites, and contacts only. Tap contacts only. And that will change the value that's seen in the notification screen. The menu will close after you tap that, and then you'll see contacts only, like I show here. Okay, now, it too has a choice directly below phone calls to allow calls that repeat within 3 minutes to ring your phone. And for the same reasons I discussed earlier for Android, I strongly recommend leaving this switch turned off. If it's on, then tap it to turn it off. And that completes whitelist setup, but we haven't done the schedule yet for do not disturb. So what we're going to do in notifications is tap the back arrow button that's at the top left corner.
Okay, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
The allow notifications from, I'm clicking on it, but no other thing is coming up.
If you click the word everybody,
I'm not even getting the menu coming up.
okay, scroll down a little bit. What version of iOS are you using? Do you happen to know?
I have 11. Oh, version, I'm sorry, 16.1, I believe.
Okay. This was captured from iOS 16 on my iPhone 10. If you do not see the phone calls heading below add people, I'm not in a position to help you because this is what I saw on my phone.
Okay.
Did you tap add people?
Well, there's a button that it says add people, but it's got like, it brings up my whole contact list.
No, see, that allows you to add one person at a time. That's not going to work. Well, let me put it this way. On my phone with 500 contacts, it would take me half a year. What you should see is exactly what I am showing you on this screen.
Yeah, it did not come up.
And if that means you probably
Could you
took a
show
wrong
me
turn
again the
somewhere.
allowed- Well, I'm at the allowed notifications from everything. It's just when I hit it, nothing else is coming up.
Okay, you will again, if I may suggest, wait until you receive access to the video and access to the slide deck so you can confirm that you took exactly the same path that I did to get to this screen. If you took a
Okay.
different path, that may be why you're not seeing what you're supposed to see.
Okay.
And I'm sorry you can't get it all done tonight, but that's why we have videos and that's why we have slide decks. Now, to get back to the main screen, you have to hit the back button, as I pointed out at the top left corner of the screen. And when you do that, you're back in do not disturb. Now, you have to scroll down a bit to get to this next part. Here it is. It's not visible when you're looking at the top of the screen, but when you scroll down, it has a heading called Set a Schedule. And you can edit that schedule. You can also create more than one if you wish. I am not covering why you might want or not want to do that. We're going to use the existing schedule, and in that, the schedule starts at midnight every night. Tap that, and what you see is this. And it turns out the schedule is turned on. You can see the on-off switch, what I've circled at the top. If it's not turned on, then tap it to make it turned on. And the default on my phone had a 24/7 schedule. That is, every day was selected, and it ran from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. the next day. So it was already a 24/7 schedule. Basically, all you have to do, if that's what you find on your phone, is make sure the schedule button is turned on, like you see here. It's already active for 7 days a week. It's already active for 24 hours a day, so we don't have to edit anything. And at that point, if you find that the default schedule is not running from midnight to midnight, then I'm going to show you how to change it. Just in case, you tap the to time, and you want to set it to be the same as the from time. Very much like Android, they provide 3 scrolling controls, one for the hours, one for the minutes, and one for AM, PM. So you just have to adjust those. Let me go back a bit. I'm going to get, in case you are continuing to work through this on your phone, the point is that I found a 24/7 schedule already set up on my phone as the default. Yours might not be the same. Now, I don't know why that would happen, but in any event, I found by tapping the to time, if it's not the same as the from time, I can make the pop-up appear with the 3 scrolling controls, so you can set the to time to be the same as the from time. And what that means is you've got a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week schedule, which is what you want.
Okay, is that really what I want? I mean, what if my son calls me and he has an emergency?
Is he in your contacts list?
Yes.
Then he will get through day or night because he's in the white list.
Okay, so you suggest I do this because I just have it set for 10 a.m. to 7 a.m.
I suggest you set it 24/7, but make sure that you set it up for whitelist behavior in the way that I've already shown you to do.
All right, it's set up that way. Okay.
Okay. And your son, anybody in your whitelist, any relatives, any doctors in your whitelist, anybody will be able to get through at any time, day or night. And just to give you an example of that, I was on vacation in August in Seattle, Washington. And I think I'd been there for a couple of days. I got a call at midnight my time, which meant 3 a.m. out here in on the East Coast. My daughter was on vacation in Maryland with her in-laws, and she called me up at that hour, midnight my time, 3 a.m. her time, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Daddy, my water broke." So we all know what that means, but it turns out she was more, and it was 6 weeks early, and it turned out the nearest hospital that had a NICU was an hour and 10 minutes away. So she had to wake up the in-laws and get on the road.
Oh my
and
God.
hope she could get there in time, which she did. They had to do a C-section, which wasn't surprising. It was her second child, and she expected that because she's a tiny thing. She's 5'1". Yeah, they're at home now, and everybody's doing fine. She lives 35 minutes away from me, and I was over there yesterday. But the child was in the NICU for 5 weeks, and so she had to stay in Morgantown, West Virginia for 5 weeks.
Oh
She got into Ronald McDonald House, so it didn't cost her anything, but she was very frustrated.
Oh yeah. Where do you live in Northern Virginia?
I live in Arlington County, which is the home of the Pentagon, just a few minutes from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, my daughter lives in Annandale in Fairfax, so we're often there.
I know where Annandale is. I shot one of my favorite photographs in a biopreserve at the corner of Annandale Road and the Beltway. And,
Can we
um,
finish up the subject?
pardon me?
Can we
Sorry,
finish up the subject?
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was a real surprise because it's
sorry.
inside the Beltway. It was a buck. It was a deer with
Oh, my
antlers,
goodness.
and it's my favorite photo of a deer with antlers of all those that I shot.
Wow.
I
Wow.
shoot a lot in the mountains in West Virginia, and I do see those occasionally, but this one was just perfect.
Oh, wow.
So
That's exciting.
and well, you know what happens?
We need to know about the iPhones?
Pardon me?
You know what we need to know about the iPhones? Are we done?
Were we finished?
Oh, no, we're not finished yet. No. We just got off topic. What's going on in Northern Virginia is simply that there were areas for over 100 years in the north side of Loudoun County, which is upriver, that have been farms and with a lot of trees. And so all sorts of things live up there, deer, foxes. I don't know, there might be bears. I've seen one picture of a bear, and believe it or not, coyotes. I found a coyote here. I saw it twice in the space of 3 days, 2 blocks away from me in Arlington County. And that's something I never expected to see ever. But what's going on is all that land in Northern Loudoun County, when the farmers retire, they sell it to developers because that part of the county is now a massive suburb of Washington, D.C.
Excuse me. We're trying to learn about the iPhone and we got a bunch of people here getting ready to leave because we're not talking about Virginia and shooting animals and bucks and deer.
Fine. I will go back to what you need to know.
Thank you.
Okay. The next thing we're going to learn is how to disable Do Not Disturb on iPhone with iOS 16. In the home screen, you open the control center, which looks like this. And you do that by dragging the upper right corner of the screen to the center of the screen. In the control center, there is a choice called Do Not Disturb, and normally it will say below it the word on, like I've circled here. And then it pops up this control, and it gives you choices for temporarily disabling the Do Not Disturb behavior. The first choice is for 1 hour. The second choice is very nebulous. It's called until this evening. And I don't know how they define that. So for the most part, I would suggest using for 1 hour, but you can try until this evening. It may be based on sundown in your local area. I don't know. This is the part that changed in iOS 16. They used to have a Do Not Disturb switch that you just turn off. But in any event, no matter what you choose, if it runs past the start time of Do Not Disturb, then Do Not Disturb will automatically turn on based on your schedule. So that's it. Now we're almost done. I'm going to talk about maintaining your whitelist. And these are some numbers that you might not yet have in your contacts that you really ought to have. If you do have kids at home or grandkids for that matter, include your kids' schools, especially the automated school closure calls, just in case the schools get flooded, the schools get snowed in, like what's going on in LA and Santa Barbara County right now. Your doctors, including the specialists, the people who don't normally have a reason to call you, your lawyers, your veterinarians, your stockbrokers, and the big one that nobody should ever be without, your publisher's clearinghouse. Okay, now, there are other ways to block robocalls. I've mentioned some of them. Umail, which is free, it's probably supported by ads. And they have a server farm. They redirect your calls to the app on your phone for Umail, redirects your calls to their server farm. And they enforce a blacklist, which means it's not very effective anymore. You must give your contacts to Umail. I get a little nervous when somebody says, give me your entire contacts list. But because they have your contacts list, when calls come in from your contacts, they're redirected back to your phone. Voicemails, even from blacklisted numbers, are saved on the email servers and are sent to you as text messages. They do a transcription. Also, you can listen to those voicemails using the email app. Now, having said that, for a while, particularly in 2019 and 2020, I was getting voicemails in Chinese. Listening to those probably doesn't do me any good. And I suspect the transcriptions are not transcribed to English if they're transcribed at all. So there's a limit to what can be accomplished. Now, the next one is the older one called Nomo Robo, and they charge money, $20 a year, and they claim to update their blacklist every 15 minutes. They don't give much information on their website to explain the details of what they do. But I will tell you that I have talked to people who have been Nomo Robo customers, and they tell me that its accuracy in deterring robocalls has been declining, which is not surprising since they use a blacklist. I've already explained why blacklists aren't much use anymore. Now, RoboKiller, they're sort of the new kid on the block, and they use a very different mechanism. It's not based on a blacklist. It is very expensive, $40 a year. It uses what they claim to be artificial intelligence, or AI, to determine if a call coming in is the same as a prior call known to be a robocall. And they do that by comparing the audio. They claim that the comparison is completed in less than 1 second. Now, if a match is found, they block it from ringing your phone. But I will tell you that I looked at both the Android version and the iOS version of the RoboKiller app, and the latest versions get very, very low ratings from users. So the thing is not what you might call ready for prime time. The FCC, they imposed a requirement on all phone carriers to adopt a phone number verification tech identified by the acronym STIR/SHAKEN. And that was to use a digital system called a certificate, which is an encryption technology, to confirm that the caller ID shown is real. And that technique is based on the same tech that enables you to make secure purchases and bank transactions and stock trades over the web. It was invented many years ago at MIT. Now, I bought a Samsung Galaxy phone, an S20, in December and updated it to Android 13 in mid-December. It turned out Android 13 is the first Android version to support STIR/SHAKEN. And I'm going to show you what I saw. Some caller IDs from known callers and some from unknown callers show up with a green check mark. I circled it here. This is in my recent calls list. And that check mark indicates that a known real number caller ID was presented and confirmed by the STIR/SHAKEN tech. Interestingly, one of my kids has a green check mark when they call me, and one other of them does not. They're both on Verizon Wireless. I do not know why one is confirmed and the other is not. That's very puzzling. But in any event, for an unknown caller ID, I do not answer. I do not return the call. I have no idea why they called. Now, there's another one that goes a bit further than the FCC technique. Google now has a system called verified calls, and businesses must sign up to use it. This image shows what would be displayed on the call recipient screen when somebody is using verified calls to call you. I do not know if this shows up for a phone that doesn't have verified calls on it. It may be that you have to install the verified calls app on your phone in order to see this when you are receiving a call. It displays the actual name of the business, even if it's not in your contacts. It displays the phone number and it displays a short text identifying the reason for the call.
Okay, is
Um,
this called Google verified calls?
That is correct.
Okay,
Now, it's important to point out, not every business will sign up for this. There is a monthly subscription fee. I do not know, like I said, I do not know if you have to install the same app on your phone or not. I do not know if Google verified calls will charge you a subscription fee if you install the thing on your phone. This is a very new thing, but this is the point of what Google is trying to establish, that you can get calls that you can answer, you can screen. I don't know what that means, but it may mean that send it to voicemail. And you can reply with a text. So that's Google verified calls. Now, I'm going to mention briefly what you'll learn in part 2. Part 2 involves a lot more than just configuring your phone line like you've learned in part 1. What you're going to learn is how to modify your voicemail greeting to convince robocall systems that your line is not in service. And the way we do that is using the same sit tones that are produced by the telezapper device. When you do that, and a robocall system calls you, they will hear the sit tones and hang up immediately. Now that means they do not leave a voicemail message, which for me was immensely useful. But they go further. When they hear the sit tones, they remove your phone number from that system's active callers, active numbers list. So they will not call again. There is a possibility that they will call again in 6 months or so to see if your number is active again, which if it was truly a number you had given up, somebody else might be using it. But in our case, when they call again, they'll hear the same sit tones and they will again no longer call you. And here was my experience when I did this. In 2018, I was receiving roughly 25 robocall voicemails per week. And they were filling up my voicemail inbox roughly twice a week. And so I started using the virus and what is called filter app, and it excluded about 50% of those calls per week. I was still getting roughly 12. And in July 2019, I installed my own custom voicemail greeting that included the sit tones at its beginning. And after 8 months of experience, my rate of incoming robocalls fell to 2 per week, 2 from 25. And after 8 months of experience, my rate of voicemails on my phone from robocalls fell to 0 per week and has stayed there ever since. Now, that's what you're going to learn in part 2, how to accomplish that for yourself. I'm going to mention one other thing, shameless self-promotion. On Saturday, March 18th, which is about 2 weeks from now, I will present a brand new topic called invisible apps on your phone or your tablet and explain why those are things that you need to terminate and how to do so. I'm doing that for my home club, which is called the Potomac Area Technology and Computer Society. The abbreviation is PATACS. Some people pronounce it pay taxes. Being from the Washington area, I don't find that very appealing. I pronounce it Pat Aces. Now, in order to attend that meeting through Zoom, you can send email to Fairfax Meeting, FFXMTG @pataces.org. You will need to include your full name, your city and state, and your user group name, Cajun Clickers. However, if you already know or you wish to learn how to scan a QR code, if you scan this with your smartphone, It will write the email for you. You still have to add your full name and your city and state, and there are spaces in that email that are clearly labeled for you to do so. So if you don't know how to scan it currently, but you want to learn, you can save this now and scan later, just like we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. I'll give you a minute to do that, or at least a few seconds. Okay, so that's it. I have given you my email address in a form that the people who troll the web for such things will probably not be able to understand. And also the address of my computer club's website, padaces.org.